The Northern Tier bike trip came about from what I call a perfect storm in my life. I was out of work and brokenhearted. The girl of my dreams, she gave me my WPs, or my walking papers. So I needed some time to heal and to think, and a long-distance solo bike trip seemed to be just what the doctor ordered. So the make part of this make adventure was the panniers. And backpacking and bicycle touring are different. In backpacking, you can sometimes carry like a week's worth of freeze-dried food with you in your pack. But with bicycle touring, not so much. The capacity isn't as much, but you don't really have to, because you're going from town to town during the day, and you could buy your snacks and eat them on the fly. But at the end of the day, usually you load up at the last grocery store with the groceries you need for dinner and breakfast the next morning. And that requires some creative stuffing. You have to jam all that stuff into your panniers and then get to camp with the extra load. Well, the panniers I made for my last trip were secured with zippers, and all that stuffing and cramming really stressed out the zippers. So those panniers were pretty much shot. So I needed new panniers. Well, panniers back then were expensive, and the ones you could find were not the greatest quality. So I went to the library and I found this book. It's called How to Make Your Own Lightweight Camping and Hiking Gear by Vic Rolling Hines, and it's copyright 1981. And I happened to find this particular book on eBay, The Miracles of the Internet, but I didn't have that back then. Instead, I checked the book out and put some coins in a Xerox machine and copied the pages that I wanted, namely the plans for the panniers and plans for a Swift pack. And this is what the panniers, they're still my favorite. They are made out of this cotton duck material, which is kind of nice to the touch, and it breathes a little bit, so the skank doesn't build up too much inside the panniers. And when they get wet, the fabric contracts and becomes somewhat waterproof. Maybe not 100%, but if you have something you really want to keep dry, like I would keep my clothes and my toilet paper, for example, in plastic bags. But what I liked the best about it was there are no zippers. It's all held together with this paracord and these cinch buttons. And so you can really overstuff these things without any problem. No zippers on the whole pack. So they're really nice. I was frustrated on the last trip. There were times I wanted to get away from the bike, maybe take a little hike or an overnight trip. But it was impractical to gather up all your panniers and sleeping bag and go down the trail. So this Swift pack is a pretty cool solution. It's really just an oversized fanny pack, and you wear it around your waist. And I'm a little thicker than I was back then, but you snap this on, and there's a bandolier, kind of a shoulder strap that goes over the top that you can wrap your tent around that bandolier. And it worked great. In fact, this trip really began in Skagway, Alaska with my Swift pack. I spent some time up there exploring, camping, fishing, and just used my Swift pack. I took the Inside Passage State Ferry from Skagway down to Seattle, and that was really kind of an adventure in and of itself. They allow you to pitch your tent on the top deck of the boat, and so we had this little kind of ripstop nylon tent community of outdoorsy people sharing stories, watching nature. There were whales and tons of eagles, and the ferry would go from town to town, so we got to see some of the culture and as we went down through the passage. When we got to Seattle, my bike was waiting for me, so I loaded it up and started pedaling north until I got to Route 20. I turned right and started heading east on Route 20 through the North Cascades. And sometimes they call the North Cascades the Alps of America. Maybe somewhat of a well-kept secret, but it's really a beautiful part of the country. So I pedaled through the park, and the last major pass is Washington Pass, and it took pretty much all day to get to the summit of Washington Pass, probably as much as 8 hours of pedaling. When I got to the top, it was a 45-minute coast down to the other side. And I remember it was like riding into a blow dryer because I was going from the wet side of Washington State to the dry side of Washington State. I continued to pedal on the north side of Washington State into Idaho and Montana. And solo bicycle touring has its pros and cons. The bummer is sometimes you have an experience or you see something and you'd really like to share that with somebody. But on the upside, when you're by yourself, you're more approachable, people come up and talk to you, and it allows you to connect with other cyclists and have some different experiences riding with other people. So my first cycling partner was Norm. I met Norm right at the gateway to Glacier National Park. And Norm and I explored the park together. We did a lot of cycling. We did the Going to the Sun Highway, which is this epic ride up to Logan Pass, and did a lot of hiking. So it was really fun to have somebody there to share that beautiful park with. When I got to the border of Canada, Norm continued east and I split off and followed the Continental Divide up to Banff. And from Banff, I picked up what's called the Icefields Parkway that runs from Banff to Jasper. And it should be on every cyclist bucket list. It is just the most amazing stretch of road. The roads have really wide shoulders. The mountains and the lakes are just amazingly beautiful. There are times when the ice fields or the glaciers come out nearly to the road. So that was just such a beautiful trip going from Banff to Jasper. I really, really enjoyed it. So much so that when I got to the north part of it in Jasper, I just turned around and headed south and pedaled all the way back to Banff. I had a couple pretty cool youth hostel experiences along the Icefield Parkway. Youth hostel started back at the end of the First World War, and it was an opportunity to give young travelers a place to stay that was inexpensive and safe. And usually you have to be a member, so I was a member of the youth hostel organization, and they're very different. The one in Banff was way off in the sticks. It was down a dirt path of about 2 miles, definitely off the grid. They heated it with firewood. To offset the cost, sometimes they'll assign chores for the guests to do, and my chore was splitting firewood, which was really quite nice. It was nice to be able to use my arms for a change. So the other youth hostel had a really cool bathing protocol. It was just south of Jasper, and they had a wood-fired sauna, again, off the grid. And you would get in the sauna and just bake yourself, just get as hot as you could possibly stand, and then run outside and jump into the ice-cold mountain stream. So that was really quite invigorating, a lot of fun. A unique experience, made a lot of memories. So from Banff, I started heading east, and I went from the most epic, beautiful, amazing cycling experience to probably the most dreadful and difficult, rigorous cycling environment as I started pedaling across the plains of Alberta and Saskatchewan. It was getting cold. There were times I'd wake up and my water bottle was frozen. But the worst part was the winds had shifted and they were coming more from the north, east, which was the direction I was heading. So I had a headwind, and any cyclist will tell you that a headwind is their worst nightmare. So as I'm slogging along these flat plains, I met my second cycling companion, Ian. Ian was from New Zealand, and I'll never forget when Ian first saw me, he said, "Hello, mate, it's good to see someone else is touched in the head cycling this godforsaken country." So Ian and I pedaled together for about 300 miles. I'll talk more about Ian in a future video when I had the chance to go to New Zealand and cycle with him in his native land. So we parted ways. He continued east and I started working my way down into the States. I came into North Dakota. And things improved a little bit in North Dakota. The weather was still pretty raunchy, but the population was a little more dense. So I would pedal maybe 30 to 50 miles to get to a town, whereas up in Canada, sometimes it was 80 miles plus before I could find a town. Working my way further east, I came to Minnesota and Wisconsin, and cycle touring became fun again. The foliage provided a little bit of break from the wind, and the trees were changing colors, and these little quiet country roads were just a joy to pedal. I followed the Mississippi River down into Iowa, and in Dyersville, Iowa is when I met my third and final cycling companion. By far my favorite, became a life partner, and it was love at first sight. And I'll tell you more about that in the next video. So thanks so much for watching the Sojourn Cyclery channel. Happy make adventuring and blessings.